Good afternoon. I hope everybody's having a good weekend. Super Bowl weekend. Who do you guys like? I'm going with, I don't know. I think it's a toss-up, man. Either team could win. Let's hope it's a close game and no shady shit goes on. Years ago, we always told people, have a nice day. Now it's be safe. I watch a lot of Dateline, 48 Hours, 2020. I'm a big fan of Court TV. A lot of interesting cases and trials. But I'll tell you, sometimes I'm scared to leave the freaking house. There's a lot of sick bastards out there. So if and when you're out and about, please be careful. Put your cell phones down. Keep your head on a swivel. And don't get caught lacking. Jimmy here in Chicago, and not just in Chicago, but in other cities, they're releasing dangerous inmates out of jail by the thousands. Then you got tens of thousands of homeless people living on the streets, living in buses, living in trains, living at the airports. Some of them are violent criminals, fresh out of the county. Some of them are drug addicts, and the rest of them have all serious mental illnesses. And they all stink to high heaven. Now you're going to add 30, 40,000 migrants to this cesspool. Chicago, my hometown, the city I was born in, the city I love, the city I bleed, is now a cesspool of immigrants, illegals, and migrants. I see these people everywhere. Every time I go to Dunkin' Donuts, any store, any restaurant, any bar, any cafe, they're everywhere. 2 blocks from my house is one of the best bakeries in the city. Here's an immigrant with a newborn baby sitting on the stoop. She's been here 2 weeks now, every day from sunrise to sunset. Now, I can't help this lady. You got immigrants living in churches, community centers, O'Hare Airport, Midway Airport, fire stations, and police stations. Now imagine you're a Cook County, you're a Chicago detective, and you got to walk through squalor, through a cesspool, through a herd of migrants just to get to your desk. You got migrants camping out at some of the hotels downtown Chicago. Half of them refuse to leave. Half of them are demanding to get in. Cops can't do anything about it. Now, most of these migrants are harmless, like this lady here with her little baby, but some of the men are very dangerous. They're criminals, they're terrorists, they're gangbangers. Look what happened in New York City. A mob of 14 migrants brutally beat and stomped two New York policemen in Times Square. They showed a video of them repeatedly kicking the cops in the head. Can't believe the cop never fired his gun in self-defense. I've been to New York City and Times Square many times before and after 911. There's always a strong police presence, especially in Times Square. But this shows you how brazen these migrants are. Right here in Oak Brook, which is a very wealthy suburb west of Chicago, that's where Joe Ferriola used to live. The boss of Chicago outfit, Joey Aiuppa, Joe the Builder, all heavyweights in the Chicago outfit, lived in Oak Brook. Well, just recently at Oak Brook Mall, they arrested 7 migrants for shoplifting. Then in Orland Park, southwest suburb, they arrested 5 migrants for armed robbery. So it's just a matter of time before these migrants start attacking civilians. But one thing I learned about these people is this: they do not like their picture or video taken. You pull out your camera and that shuts them up. But enough with migrants. I got a quick short story today to start out Super Bowl weekend. You guys are going to love it. About a very dangerous man here. An enforcer for the Chicago outfit, Anthony the Hatch Chiaramonte. And you can just imagine why they call him the Hatch. I'll let your imagination take over. First time I laid eyes on this monster was at the Dirksen Federal Building on the 25th floor during the Sam Carlisi trial. And I was very lucky going back to the mid 2000s, to the mid 90s, right around 1996, to sit in on the Sam Carlisi trial. Prior to that, I went to my very first trial, which was the Gus Alex trial. I seen that lowlife, Lenny Patrick, commit perjury on the stand and testify against Gus Alex. I did a story about that if you want to check out that show. Unfortunately for Gus, the jury actually believed Lenny Patrick, found him credible. He was convicted. And since that trial, I was hooked. Interesting thing about the Gus Alex trial is Gussie and Lenny Patrick would use doctors at Northwestern Memorial Hospital to send and receive messages. I thought that was pretty cool. But since then, I was hooked. So my very second trial was the Sam Carlisi trial. This was a major RICO case. They got him on racketeering, loan sharking, operating a multi-million-dollar gambling operation in the suburbs, and arson. 8 defendants blue trial. Here you got Boss of Chicago outfit in the gray suit, Sam Wing Carlisi, his underboss in the brown suit, bald guy, little Jimmy Marcelo. And right there in the pecking order, Jimmy's right-hand man is Tony Zizzo. Tony Zizzo's number one enforcer was Anthony the Hatch Chiramonte. In the front, these 4 defendants, I forget 2 of their names, but 2 of them are actually brothers, the Bonavolante brothers. These guys were charged with firebombing, arson, several theater owners that weren't paying, that weren't getting in line. Carlisi gave the order to Lenny Patrick. Lenny Patrick testified that he gave the order to James Lavelli, Mario Renone, and Nick Gio to firebomb several theaters in the Chicagoland area. And they testified that Carlisi was the one that gave the green light. So that was damaging evidence against Carlisi and the crew. These guys also had bookies in the surrounding suburbs. Each bookie was taking in $75,000 to $150,000 on an average weekend in bets. They had over 8,000 customers. So imagine being in the courtroom, seeing all these defendants, especially heavyweights like Chiramonte, Zizzo, Little Jimmy, and Wings. You're 15, 20 feet away from these guys. Most of them are on their best behavior, but at times, Chiramonte, especially when James Lavelli and Lenny Patrick was testifying, he was losing it. He was yelling, he was screaming, he was slamming his hand on the table, kicking. I thought for sure he was going to leap over the defense table and attack James Lavelli. Judge Plunkett had to stop court several times and reprimand him, threatening to gag him, threatening him to remove him from the courtroom. And then Carlisi, the oldest guy in the courtroom, every time the prosecutor would refer to Sam Carlisi as boss of the Chicago outfit, Carlisi would lose it. He would get up, yell, start saying, "Those are lies. That's not true. Your Honor, I can't listen to this anymore." I never seen a major mob guy like Sam Carlisi lose his temper in the courtroom. Even their own lawyers had a hell of a time controlling them. Eventually, though, like most defendants at a federal trial, all the defendants were found guilty. Each guy got anywhere from 10 to 15 years in prison. I remember Sam Carlisi, I think, got 13 years in prison. Another thing I forgot to mention is one of their crew members, this guy they called Jeeps, he was talking to the grand jury, and Carlisi was obsessed with getting him killed. So they had a hell of a time tailing and killing Jeeps, but the government was able to show the effort, the intent to kill Jeeps, and that was one of the charges. Unfortunately for Jeeps, they never got to him, but he was definitely in their scope. Now, this was Anthony Chiramonte's attorney, Joe the Shark Lopez. I seen him represent Frank Calabrese in the courtroom. I also seen him represent Mario Renone on a small gun charge. This is one of the best defense attorneys in Chicago, somewhat of a mob attorney, very flashy dresser, real character, very sociable. He's actually barred Shell from the Dirksen Federal Building, which I don't know if it's ever happened before, but he did some things that were a little shady. So they shelved him from the Dirksen Federal Building. He can't practice any cases there, but I'm sure he'll be back It's just temporary. But I'll never forget one time I asked him, how are you able to handle Frank DeBreeze in the courtroom? Because I went to that trial. Frank Calabrese, after seeing Joey testify, DeBreeze wanted to get up there and tell his side of the story, how Nick and his son Junior conspired to steal all his millions and lock him up in jail, which was pretty much the truth. But the judge, Zago, would not allow Frank Calabrese to go on and on and on. He kept stopping him. The prosecution kept objection. Meanwhile, Calabrese was losing his temper, especially when Nicky and his brother and his son testified against him. You can imagine Calabrese was pounding his fists on the table, yelling, swearing, yelling out to his son Kurt in the gallows. But Joe Lopez told me, I'll never forget, that Anthony Chiaramonte during the family secrets trial was way worse to handle than Frankie Breeze. That's how nasty Chiaramonte is. But this is Joe Lopez. If you ever get in trouble, God forbid, you definitely want to call him. He's got all the connections. And one thing I love about this guy, he will never represent a government informant. Now here's Anthony the Hatch Chiaramonte. First time I laid eyes on him was during the Sam Carlisi trial. This guy was a very stubborn lieutenant of the Chicago outfit, a debt collector, a loan shark, a killer, someone kind of like a Tommy Karate type, kind of like a Roy DeMeo, a guy that actually enjoyed torturing, killing people. Who knows how many guys this guy has had clipped, a very dangerous assassin. He got convicted in the Sam Carlisi trial, did some years in prison. It stood up, never ratted, never informed on anybody. But when he got out of jail, he wanted to take over, not only his old rackets, but he wanted to become one of the bosses in that area. And things have changed at that time. There were new guys in power at the time, but he didn't give a fuck. He wasn't backing down from anybody. He wanted what he felt was his. I'll never forget when they played the tapes during the Sam Carlisi trial of the Hatch. He slammed a guy in a hot grill. The guy was wearing a wire. He slammed the guy in a hot grill and then kept stabbing him with the fork. The guy was screaming in agony. Imagine being in the courtroom, hearing those tapes. But this is Anthony Chiaramonte, very dangerous, evil, sadistic type of man. And I'll never forget, him and I kind of had a little bit of a stare down towards the end of the trial during a break in the afternoon one day. We locked eyes. And I'll never forget it. I almost had trouble sleeping for like 2 weeks. I mean, his eyes were like black coal, like piercing. There's nothing there. And he was probably thinking when he was staring at me, who the fuck are you? But imagine being in the courtroom, having a stare down with a monster like this. Now, a guy like Jimmy Marcelo has many options as far as made members and associates to take care of the heavy work. But this guy here, Anthony the Hatch, was Jimmy and Tony Zizzo's top enforcer. He grew up through the Chicago outfits, grew up through the ranks as a thief, a burglar, a hijacker, and then started putting in some heavy work. He eventually died at 67 years old. Now here we got an interesting guy, another guy that flew low kind of for a little while, trucking executive Fred Barbara. He's an associate of 26th Street crew. He's also good friends with Mayor Daley. Nick Calabrese testified that he participated in a firebombing in a couple of their scores that the crew did. This guy made millions of dollars as a trucking executive through the corrupt hired truck programs in the city of Chicago. But one time he was wearing a wire. They didn't know it. He borrowed $30,000 from Anthony the Hatch. Anthony the Hatch grabbed him by the throat and was threatening him that he was going to kill him if he didn't come up with the money. And you could hear Barbara pleading for his life. Please take your hands off my throat. Please stop. You're choking me. But to hear those tapes of Anthony the Hatch choking this man were chilling. Not sure what happened to him. He probably maybe did just a little bit of time in jail, maybe not even a year, had to pay a fine and cooperated. But this guy was no Boy Scout. He was definitely involved in a lot of bombings and robberies, along with probably even a couple of murders, according to Nick Calabrese's testimony. But this is one victim of Anthony the Hatch. You know, you have no problem Anthony the Hatch had no problem loaning you the money, but God forbid if you didn't pay him back. Now here we got to talk about Johnny Apes real quick. After Angelo LaPetria and Jimmy LaPetria died, it was Johnny Apes that took over the lethal 26th Street crew. According to Nick Calabrese's testimony, he was lookout with Frank Calabrese when they killed John Fecarata, and he also gave the green light to kill Ronnie Jarrett. Ronnie Jarrett was defying the Apes. He didn't like Apes being the new boss. He was skimming some money. The Apes had enough, so he had Ronnie Jarrett killed. But when Apes died, some of the Southside rackets went to the Cicero crew. So there was a little bit of a power shift there. And that's when some of the scheming, plotting, and planning of some of these murders came up, was after Apes died and the power shifted in the outfit. Now here's little Jimmy Marcelo, underboss of the Chicago outfit. I seen him the first time during the Sam Carlisi trial. He did his time like a man, never informed, never even thought of cooperating. Came home from prison after the Carlisi trial, got 2 years out of freedom with his family, and then fast forward 2005, he's picked up on the Family Secrets trial. But when Jimmy Marcelo went to prison and was convicted in the Family Secrets trial, some of his rackets were passed on, obviously, to his brother Mikey and also Mike Sarno. As we all know what happened with Sarno. Sarno took over the video poker business, and he ended up getting pinched on that as well. Sometimes I wonder, is it worth it, these video poker machines? I mean, I see them everywhere, and people play them all over the place. But Jimmy's Marcelo is also the prime suspect as far as who had Tony Zizzo killed and who gave the order to kill Anthony the Hatch Chiaramonte. Now, I'm not sure if I believe that, because Jimmy Marcelo was very close with Tony Zizzo. But when Jimmy was in the can, he obviously lost a lot of his power. But Jimmy Marcelo set up a meeting with Anthony Chiaramonte, his brother, and Frankie Schweiss. Here's his brother here. And on a side note, these guys are talking about the babysitter. They're referring to John Ambrose. He was a federal agent who was watching Nick Calabrese during the Family Secret investigation. And they were trying to get through. They were trying to get to Nick Calabrese so he wouldn't cooperate. And they almost did. And they said that Mike Sarno and Tony Zizzo were Nick Calabrese's biggest threats. That one of those two, if not both of those guys, would have took out Nick Calabrese if they got their chance. But they referred to that as the babysitter. I actually went to the babysitter's trial against John Ambrose. It was interesting. Mikey Marcelo was a defendant in the Family Secrets trial. He came out in an orange jumpsuit and must have made a deal with the government to testify against John Ambrose, which was devastating evidence against John Ambrose, who was a federal marshal. But I remember noticing how much weight Mikey Marcelo lost being locked up for a couple of years. But Jimmy Marcelo set up a meeting with Anthony the Hatch, his brother Mikey, and then he sent this man here, probably as backup to his brother, Frank the German, Frankie Schweiss. So the FBI had these guys under investigation, and there was witnesses as well. They were inside a pancake house, the three of them. They got in a verbal altercation. It escalated. It went outside where Chiaramonte was yelling at Frankie Schweiss, yelling at Mikey Marcelo back and forth. And Chiaramonte even pushed Frankie Schweiss and shoved Mikey Marcelo before getting into his BMW and taking off. But I'm sure Mikey Marcelo went right back to his brother Jimmy and what happened. A couple weeks after that, New Year or Thanksgiving, the Hatch, I think this was in 2001, the Hatch just got done having a nice little family dinner and drinks with his family and friends. He was outside this Brown's Chicken and Lions making a couple phone calls. All of a sudden, according to the getaway driver, who was a government informant, he pulled up in a green minivan. A masked gunman got out in a Chicago Bears jacket and fired 5 shots, killing Chiaramonte. Chiaramonte caught the play as soon as the van pulled up. He tried to run back in the vestibule, but it was too late. He was shot and killed. I think he was like 67 years old. Like I said, when he got out of jail, he wanted to take over certain rackets. He wasn't backing down. He wasn't listening to anybody. And sure enough, he was another victim of the Chicago outfit. Here's Mike Sarno. Mike Sarno had major beef with this guy, Chiaramonte. Sarno also had beef with Tony Zizzo. We all know what happened to Mikey. He got pinched on a bombing charge where his crew blew up a competitor in Berwyn, a video poker business. I went to this trial. This was one of my favorite trials. I felt the evidence against Large wasn't that strong. All the evidence was mostly against Mark Polkman and some of the other defendants. But unfortunately for Mike, he was convicted. That's automatically 25 years. He's trying to get out on compassionate release. Hopefully one day he'll be able to come home to his family. This man is no threat to anybody anymore. But Mike Sarno is a suspect as well in the disappearance of Zizzo. He's also a suspect in the given the green light to kill Anthony the Hatch. Sarno is very close with this guy here, the other Calabrese, Tough Tony Calabrese. He was loyal to Mike Sarno. He's the alleged trigger man that killed Anthony the Hatch. Tough Tony is also the alleged triggerman that killed Ronnie Jarrett. So obviously the outfit leaders trust a guy like Tough Tony. And I went to his trial. I'll never forget it. One of the charges was they went into a tattoo parlor on the south side, him and his crew, and they smashed up all the equipment in the tattoo parlor, as well as the hands of one of the artists, because that tattoo artist tattooed a granddaughter of a mob boss. So that was payback for tattooing an underage girl who just happened to be the granddaughter of a Chicago mob boss. But what was interesting about the Tough Tony case was his one of the guys in his crew, Cooper, actually wore a wire on him. Tony suspected him of wearing a wire and was literally beating him, kicking him with steel-toe boots. And you could hear this guy getting stomped with the wire rolling. But Tough Tony never found that wire. But Cooper testified that he was the wheelman when a masked ski man got out and killed Ronnie Jarrett. The alleged shooter was Tough Tony Calabrese. And Cooper also testified that he pulled up in a green minivan at the Brown's Chicken and Lion, and masked gunmen, allegedly Tough Tony Calabrese, got out in a Chicago Bears jacket and killed Anthony the Hatch 5-6 times. Now, guys like Ronnie Jarrett and guys like Anthony the Hatch, these are savvy Chicago outfit guys, both of them hitters themselves. Very hard targets to get. So whoever gave Anthony Calabrese the green light to kill the Hatch and Ronnie Jarrett, they had to have a lot of trust and faith, knowing that he could get it done. Eventually, he was found guilty. 50 years, was never convicted, though, of the murder of the Hatch or Ronnie Jarrett, but he got a 50-year sentence, did a couple years, tried to get out from Trump, tried to get a pardon from Donald Trump on compassionate release, but Tough Tony Calabrese eventually died. I'll never forget seeing him in court. Very intimidating guy. He looked like an NFL linebacker. Now here we got Little Tony Anthony Zizzo, made member of Chicago outfit. Nick Calabrese testified in the Family Secrets trial that he was one of the men that was made by Joey Aiuppa and Al Tornabini. He was kind of like Jimmy Marcello's underboss, if you will. Little Tony Zizzo made millions of dollars for him in the Chicago outfit. When Little Jimmy went to prison, he lost his best friend, lost his power, and eventually he went missing. Fast forward 2006. He went to a meeting in Melrose Park. Then from there, he was going downtown to Rush Street. He's never been found, never been seen since that day, back in 2006. Some people think he was one of the latest victims of the Chicago outfit. Some people think he's MIA. Me personally, I think he landed. I think he had enough money to go on a lam. I don't think he ended up like his good buddy Jimmy Marcelo. But Tony Zizzo had major beef with Large. Tony Zizzo lost control of his number one assassin, his number one enforcer, Chiramonte. This is another unsolved murder of the Chicago outfit, another mystery. And I would not be surprised if one day there is a family secrets trial too, because of, like I said, there's a lot of unsolved murders, and some of those families need closure. But what do you guys think of Anthony Zizzo? Please enter in your comments. Thanks for watching. But a man like this, kind of like a Ronnie Jarrett, they live by the sword, they die by the sword. So you can't feel sorry hearing bad news that he was shot and killed. But this guy was a very dangerous, very vicious enforcer. I will never forget having a little bit of a stare down with him in the court building. As we all know, all these trials, this kind of life, they all get it in the end. They either end up dead or in jail. It's not worth it, no matter how much money you're making. If you guys like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. My next story, I'm going to talk about a couple high-rise condos I lived in downtown, and years before, wise guys who lived in those buildings as well. Have a good weekend and enjoy the Super Bowl, guys. Thank you.